Hey there, Anthony here with the Piano Dojo weekly proficiency videos. And what do you know, we've made it to week 6. This is the very end of our first unit, which is major scales. So today we're going to do a rhythmic warm-up. We're going to look at a really cool thing that I like to call the evolution of the key shape. It's only going to take a moment. We're going to add our last 2 scales today, which are going to be B flat major and F major. And then we're going to do a piece of sight reading music called Echo Dance. All right? So without further ado, let's head on over to the drum and get warmed up. Here we are with our week 6 rhythm warm-up. We're going to do this the same way that we've been doing the past few, but now that we're at the end of our scales unit, we will add a new layer next week. So let's test ourselves out and see how well we have learned this current method. All right, so we're going to start on line 1. We're going to have our metronome at 40 BPM. We're going to start with the metronome representing the downbeats. Our right hand is going to read the rhythmic line, and our left hand is going to read the quarter note line. And it will go something like this. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and switch your hands. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and hands together top line. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, 3, and 4. There we go. All right, let's go down to line 2. We're going to speed our metronome up to 45, and we will now imagine that the click is on the upbeat. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Switch your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Top line hands together. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we are. All right, we're going to speed up to 50 BPM, but our metronome will now be on half time, and it will therefore represent only the first and the third downbeat. Here we are, line 3. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Switch hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Hands together. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. All right, and last but not least, on line 4, we're going to do the metronome on 30, which means we will actually be going at 60. And the click will now represent the downbeat, the second and the fourth downbeat. All right, so here we are. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3 and 4 and switch. 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3 and hands together. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3 and 4 and. Excellent. Now remember, if you're having trouble with any of these concepts, whether it's one of the specific lines of syncopation or it's a particular way of using the metronome, I would suggest on your own time breaking that down and practicing at your own pace with the metronome at whatever level you are having difficulty at. Remember, sometimes in the moment when you're practicing, you're not going to improve. It's just like exercising with weights. As you're lifting the weight, your muscle is not going to grow bigger. What happens is you do the work, and then your subconscious and your body figures this thing out as you're resting, and the next time you come back to it, it will be better, right? So don't get too hung up if you're not getting one of these things in that moment, because the important thing is that you're doing the work. And as long as you do the work, then each time you come back to it, you should be noticing an improvement. Even if it's just a tiny improvement, this is a process of baby steps, all right? Now don't forget, you can download all of these rhythmic warm-ups from my website, pianodojo.com. And now we're gonna head back to the piano. Now that we're all warmed up, let's continue on. And before we add those two scales, I want to talk about something that I call the evolution of the keyscape, all right? And basically what this means is I was thinking about how when we're learning these scales, we're always trying to really absorb the shape that the scale creates on the keyboard, right? And we can end up calling those notes sharps or flats or whatever, but what really matters, and I've said this a million times already, is the shape of the scale on the piano. So I got to thinking, what would happen if you lined up every single shape of all the 12 keys together? What would that pattern look like? And what I came up with was what I call the evolution of the keyscape. So let's just take a quick look at that just for fun. But this is what we have. So as you can see, each row represents the scale: do, re, mi, sol, la, ti, do. And as you can see with C, we have all white notes. For our G major, we had that one white note that started on the T, and as you continue to go, you notice that you actually get a pretty coherent shape going on here. So this isn't a random occurrence. It's pretty fascinating to see that you're actually creating sort of this meta shape. Now, does this help in the long run with these things? Maybe not, but sometimes it's nice to just know that there is this interesting shape, and who knows, maybe it'll get you some points on Jeopardy one day, right? So anyways, without further ado, let's go ahead and move on to our major scales for the day. We're gonna take a look at our B flat major scale, but before we do that, let's go ahead and add this one to the circle of fifths. So here's our circle. We're gonna come over here to B flat, and this is gonna be super simple at this point. We're only gonna have two flats in this key. Of course, we're gonna have B flat, we're gonna have E flat. Gonna have removed the A flat from the previous scale, and there we have it, B flat major. All right, let's take a look at this on the piano now. Okay, just as before, we're going to have 3 different hand positions. So we're going to block those hand positions first and foremost. So we'll start with this, here, and the third one. Back down, and then all together. We're also going to have 3 hand positions in our left hand, so we're going to block that first. And all together it will look like this. And all together we're going to get something like this. Fantastic. All right, and now let's take a look at F major. All right, so we're actually going to sort of have a return. We're going to come full circle now. We're going to get back out of the black note 3 different hand positions, and we're going to return to a similar style of finger pattern that we had with our first 5 scales. We are going to have 1 modification in the right hand. All right, so we're only going to use 4 fingers in our right hand. Unfortunately, once again, our pinky will be left out of the right hand F major scale. But let's go ahead and add this to our circle of fifths before we do our scale on the piano. So up here, we finally get up to F, and it will have 1 flat, and that flat is B flat, as we have just seen. And there we have it. We have completely filled out the key signatures for all 12 keys of our circle of fifths, and now we will be ready next week to get on to the chords. All right, now let's take a look at F major on the piano. We're going to start with our F major on the piano. If you wanted to block this, you could still do that. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Only 2 patterns in this key, and it will go something like this. And then we do have a good old-fashioned C major pattern in our right hand. We have that, or I'm sorry, in our left hand. We have our first 5 fingers and then our 3 fingers. So it'll go something like this. And all together, let's do some sight reading now. So before us, we have a piece called Echo Dance, and it is going to be in a key that should be very familiar to us today because we just talked about it. So we look at our key signature right here, and we see that there's 1 flat. And what scale, has that 1 flat in it? Well, how convenient, we just talked about it, F major. So both of our hands are going to be in F major position. Now, this piece may look a little bit hairy at first. It may look a little bit notey, but with the training that we are doing, hopefully we can look through those black notes and actually see bigger shapes. Because some people may see, oh my gosh, there's a lot of notes to read here in the left hand. Look at all these notes, right? Well, it turns out that if we use our ability to see chords, that instead of all of those red circles, we can actually see this entire section as one thing. That's right, folks. We have line, 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 right? That is a major chord. We are in the key of F, and therefore we should know that we are going to just basically be using an F major chord in our left hand. Now there are a couple places where that's going to change. We have it here, we have it here, and we have it here. But most of the notes, oh, and right there too, right? But most of the notes in this piece are going to be an F major chord in your left hand, which is going to allow you to do a lot of autopilot while you put your brain in the place that you need it, all right? So let's take a look at the harmonies now, all right? So if we go ahead and make a harmony key up here, we can see that our 1 chord is going to equal an F chord, which will be F, A, and C, and our 5 chord will equal a C chord, which will be C, E, and G. So let's go hunting for some of those, all right? Now, in our first measure, we can see that everything, every single note in here is going to be an F, A, or a C, right? So all of this is going to equal a 1. Now you may be asking yourself, what is that one tiny little measure at the beginning? That's called a pickup measure, and we're going to talk about that as soon as we finish our harmonic analysis, all right? But that 1 is going to extend all the way over until we finally get to this measure. Now, when you have a harmony that lasts for several measures, you can put that harmony at the beginning of each measure if you'd like for clarification. You don't necessarily have to if you want to keep things nice and clean. What we see here in this final measure, well, here's the thing. Remember, we want to use context clues. We want to start to think about these things before we actually have to get down and read black dots. So if we know we're going to be using the 1 and the 5, and we know that the 1 has looked this way, and we know there's one other different shape on this piano, on this piece, we know that this must be the 5. So let's take a look at what notes we have to reaffirm that this is going to be a 5 harmony. So we have our C, we have our G, we have another G, and another C, right? And we also have this B flat in there, okay? Now remember, we've been talking about that concept of the 5-7, which is when you take a 5 and you add a little bit more attention to it by adding that 7th note of that scale. If we have our C chord, C, E, G, well, we have the B flat, and it makes it a little bit more crunchy, right? And so we're going to call that our 5-7. So this is an interesting harmonic shape that we have not yet seen, where we're going to have a lot of 1. And in fact, we have 2 miniature sentences here, because you can kind of see that with our phrases, we sort of end a mini phrase right there. So we have had a phrase that is almost completely 1. That's right, you don't even have to have a 5 if you do not want to. But then, to end the second mini phrase of that section, we did hit our 5-7 so that we could propel into the next part, all right? So as we can see, looking into this next measure, we have a lot of F. We have a lot of lines down here. And then we have mostly F harmonies up here. We have one single note that doesn't fit into the F chord, and so we're going to consider that a passing tone, and we'll go ahead and label this a 1. We see that this measure looks familiar, so we're going to call that our 5-7 again, because we have a lot of C's and B flats. And that 5-7, and believe it or not, is going to last all the way until right here, all right? And then, as a final little reprise, we'll have our 5-7 one more time, and we'll end on our 1, okay? So in this instance, echo dance is sort of like a mixture of the 2 different forms that we've been seeing. The long linear forms with a mostly trajectory towards the dominant and then a quick release to the 1, and then also a flip-flop. In this case, we have a micro phrase in the middle of the first phrase, and then we have that 5-7 at the very end of the first line telling us, hey, this piece is not over yet. And then finally, we do have the flip-flopping between the 1 and the 5 on the second line with a final 5-7 to the 1 resolution. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about the concept of a pickup measure, all right? Not all music starts on beat 1. Sometimes there are a few notes that we want to start with before we actually get onto the first downbeat. In this case, we can see that we have 1 beat, all right? Now here's the thing about adding that 1 small beat before we get into the piece. And that is that beat does not come from nowhere. What happens is we are removing that beat from the very end of the piece, and we're sticking it on the beginning of the piece, all right? So because of that, you can notice that in our last measure, we actually only have 3 beats, all right? So when you have a pickup measure, you are usually removing that from the last measure. And one of the things that allows you to do is to create a circle with this piece, and you could continue playing this piece over and over. It is called echo dance, right? In perpetuity, right? Just constantly, because the last measure is now connected to that first measure with that idea of the pickup note. Now, let's take a look at the last few pieces of information here. We're going to start forte. We're going to quickly go down to a piano and then rise back up, but only to a mezzo forte. Again, on our next phrase, we'll start piano and build it to a forte, back down to a piano, and then this abbreviation RIT it's similar to the rallentando that we saw earlier. A RIT means ritardando, which means also to slow down. It's another form of dramatic slowdown before the end of a phrase. And then as we can see, we do want to follow these legato phrase markings that we are seeing, but I want to draw your attention to one thing that we have not seen, and that is the concept of the staccato. So most of this piece is going to be played legato. There's a lot of smooth arches running throughout this piece, but there are these tiny little punctuations, and just as you may have guessed, that is basically the opposite of legato. Now, some people say staccato means short, but I've always been taught that staccato means space. We want to hit the note and then feel space before we play the next note, right? So a staccato is shorter than legato. It leaves a little bit of space between the notes that it's adjacent to, and there we have it. All right, so make sure that you're paying attention to your articulations and your dynamics once you get comfortable playing this piece hands together. Let's go ahead and put our hands on this piece. So we're going to start in F major position, and we'll put our right hand on F above middle C. Now don't forget, we have B flats in here, so get your fourth finger ready for that B flat. And we're going to start on our pinky. So we'll go. So far pretty easy, just a lot of chord notes. On the next line, there's a repeated section. There we go. Let's look at our left hand. We're also going to set it up in F major position, and remember, this is the one where we're really going to use a lot of F major chord notes. Fantastic. And then, once you're ready, let's put it hands together. And there we have it. We're finished with week 6, and we're finished with our very first unit, our major scales. Now remember, the beauty of these videos is that you can go at your own pace. So if you still feel like you want to practice your major scales a little bit before jumping into chords, then you can take as much time between now and then to review whichever scales gave you the most trouble. But remember, you don't need to perfect them, because we will be coming back to scales pretty soon. In fact, we'll come back to scales a few different times, and so we'll have plenty of other opportunities to see the scales. But starting next week, we will enter Unit 2, and we're going to begin our in-depth study of chords. So remember, you can download all of these outlines and circle of fifths and sheet music. You can do that all from my website, pianodojo.com. Happy practicing, and I'll see you next week.